interactive today to get started. So first of all, this is only going to work if you are on either an iPad or your laptop, but grab your cell phone. Everybody, grab your cell phone, turn on your camera, and you should be able to connect to our webpage. Somebody, Nicole, give me a thumbs up if this works for you. Did it work?
Graham says yes.
Okay, awesome. So Great Plains Regeneration, our goal is to enhance healthy soil to create healthy people, healthy animals, and a healthy planet. And you're all going to be able to check that out on our website. Just briefly, like I said, I'm Jessica Gnad. I live in Manhattan, Kansas, and I'm going to introduce you to the team of regenerators that have been working with me for a long time to be able to form Great Plains Regeneration. And here's just a little bit about what we believe. This is supplemental to what's on the website, so go ahead and take a look at it. All right, so the GPR network, you guys are all a part of it right now. So the GPR network, we aim to serve to support farmers and ranchers by doing educational outreach events. We are here to provide mentorship. We are here to execute on different events that are very unique to agriculture. And we are also helping out financially. And most immediately, we're working on doing this through scholarships. I just found out this morning that we have a group that is willing to scholarship a good portion of event registrations, travel, and lodging to some of our GPR farmers that work within us to events that we're hosting this next fall. So that's pretty exciting. All right, take your camera out again if you don't already have that. And we're now going to take you to the About Us section of our website. So like I said, I'm Jessica Gnad, co-founder, executive director. You can follow along on your cell phone if you're able to. And I will go ahead here and keep scrolling. We also have John Roulak, who is on the call with us today. John is also the former CEO and executive director of Nutiva, which is a superfood company. We have Graham Christensen is on the line. Hi, Graham, how are you? And he's a founding board member. You're also going to hear from him with Regenerate Nebraska. Gail Fuller is with us. Ashton Brunk is our intern. Nicole Ragland is on our advisory panel. Robin O'Brien is with Replant Capital. She is also on our advisory panel. Ray Archuleta, Lynette Miller, and we've just added a brand new board member, Trey Blackhawk with the Winnebago Tribe. So a little bit about regenerative agriculture. This is probably review for a lot of you out there, but regenerative agriculture basically accepts the general principles of minimalizing the soil disturbance, maximizing species diversity, keeping the soil covered and building organic matter, maintaining a living root all year round, and integrating livestock. So I'm not really going to go into the specific components of all of these principles, but I want you to know that GPR as an organization, we're working on enhancing these in all of the areas that we work, and we're helping others learn and join this journey at the same time. So just these are a little bit about the practices that you can take to be able to adopt the principles of regenerative agriculture, species diversity. I like to talk about this one a little bit about species diversity, in my opinion, also means having a diverse group of people working together with common goals. And that's what we have with GPR. So keeping the soil covered is one, maintaining living roots throughout the growing season, integrating livestock. And then one thing that we're going to talk a lot about today with our speakers is having the context to execute specific practices based on your location, based on your resources, based on what you have available to be able to make changes. So what would success look like for us here at GPR? Specifically, we'd like to see increased biodiversity, We'd like to see expanded holistic grazing, replenished watersheds. We want to see supportive regenerative policy that is developed that takes away barriers that a lot of producers face right now to be able to change practices. We're looking to boost producer profitability, amplify regional food systems. This is one that I think is so key. We're really glad to have Gail Fuller and Graham Christensen be able to talk about these two elements today. And then ultimately, we want to see revitalized local communities. So this is just a brief introduction to Great Plains Regeneration. I have this document that I can put in the chat, and you guys can all have a copy of it and you can share it. And so our hashtag that we are using right now is Let's Regenerate. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Right now, I'd like to get to our speakers. So just for a quick introduction, I'd like to start with Graham Christensen. Can you just say hi to everybody and give a little background?
Hey, everybody. How's it going? My name is Graham Christensen from Northeast Nebraska. I'm a fifth-generation family farmer. The farm's about Northeast Nebraska, but 1 hour north of the Omaha metro area. Outside of being a farm that's transitioning towards regenerative agriculture, I also have two businesses. One is GC Resolve, and GC Resolve is working on enhancing environmentalism as a mainstream conversation in the state of Nebraska and really around the area, but it's really focused on agricultural issues and bringing home that really safe transition for farmers to move in towards regenerative, with a lot of emphasis on young people being a part of that solution. And within that was co-founded, within some of these conversations was co-founded the large Regenerate Nebraska network that has brought together a larger vision in the state of Nebraska for our future. Then I also have another side company that is somewhat related called GC Revolt, and that's solar and alternative energy development. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Graham. You've been an inspiration to us here in Kansas for a long time. I just want to thank you for your collaboration and thank you for your management and support of Great Plains Regeneration. And we're excited to hear a little bit more from you coming up soon. So next, I'd like to introduce my friend, Nicole Raglin. I'm also going to drop some of these links in the chat so you can follow our speakers today. But Nicole, it's such a pleasure to have you today. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. And thanks to all of you. Really grateful to be part of this. Jessica's been a dear friend, as has Gail and Graham, and behind the scenes, Liz Haney, and a lot of us have been in the works of creating this for the last a year, 2 years. So anyway, Nicole Raglin, I'm based in Jones, Oklahoma. I'm originally from Oklahoma. I left quite young, thinking I would never come back, and sure enough, I did a couple years ago and moved back to my family's ranch. My father is a horseman and cattleman, and I've been telling stories. I'm primarily a photographer and filmmaker. I've been telling stories on the environment for the last 15 to 20 years, and directed a film called Farmer's Footprint a couple years ago, and that really instigated my passion for regenerative agriculture. And so in the past year, I've been working on building a nonprofit here in Oklahoma called Regenerate Oklahoma, which we just got off the ground. So yeah, grateful to be here. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you so much. And GPR, we just really thank all of the different state organizations and local organizations that we're able to provide collaborative support to and with. And so thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing your expertise in Oklahoma and doing the work that you're doing. If you haven't catched Farmer's Footprint, we'll go ahead and put that in the chat box as well. So next is Gail Fuller. And how are you today, Gail?
I'm good. Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited. You know, this is a conversation that I've been looking forward to for about 20 years now. So it's great to see the discussion revolving around not just cover crops and increasing biodiversity on farms, but you know, the conversation of rejuvenating rural communities and everything that goes with regenerative agriculture is fantastic. And just a brief background on myself, I grew up on a family farm outside of Emporia, Kansas, and spent my first 57 years there. Grew up a conventional farmer, was farming 3,200 acres of Roundup Ready corn and soybeans 20 years ago. And a year and a half ago, we relocated to a 162-acre farm that we purchased near Sudbury, Kansas in Greenwood County, about an hour south of Emporia. And we are now starting over in the regenerative sense, and we've gone from soils that we took from 2% to 7% organic matter on our prior farm back to a highly degraded farm that we're now going to regenerate in real time with the whole world watching. So looking forward to the conversation today. Thanks, Jess.
Gail, that's a lot of pressure. So you've been looking forward to this conversation? You know, buckle up, let's have a conversation. I'd also like to introduce our Board of Directors, President John Roulak, and I believe he's on the phone dialing in. So John, if you are available, I would like for you just to say a few words. Oh, he is here. Great. All right. Welcome, John. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for organizing this, and it's great to see a lot of people participating. Yeah, my name's John Roulak. I've been interested in soil health and food production for many decades. Produced that little film called Kiss the Ground, which is great to see so much interest, and it's really kind of opened up this conversation about soil health and how we grow food and climate change. So out of that came the idea was, you know, where should I put some of my time and focus, and decided that let's regenerate right in the middle of the country in the vast Great Plains. And so really looking forward to that. I'm also working on how do we monetize, how do we incentivize regenerative agriculture to go to the next level versus just being an idea that's interesting but not seeing as much, you know, many acres converted. So those are some of the exciting things we're working on in Great Plains Regeneration. So great to be here today.
Thank you, John. We always appreciate your time, and thank you so much for leaning in on us. So very briefly, I just want to overview. If you check out our website, we do have 3 main avenues that we're working on right now, because we are a new organization and we're just getting started with a lot of things. So number 1 on our list is farmer-led education. Gail Fuller does a lot of this. Graham Christensen up in Nebraska does a lot of this, and Nicole does a lot of messaging that helps farmer-led education. Number 2 is watershed restoration, and we believe that healthy water is really one of the key indicators of a regenerative system. And how do we take what farmers are doing on the ground to produce clean and healthy water? We want to close that circle loop and put it back into how do we talk to our communities about what we're doing. So that's one thing that we are very interested in. And then lastly, new market development, regional market development, the ability to have a farmer-led marketplace for regeneratively produced goods. We want to really connect the urban and the rural conversation so that we're growing the food that our consumers love and that they're asking for. So on that note, Graham Christensen is going to lead us off with a presentation of all the goodness that's going on in Nebraska and the different ways that regenerative practices has helped him, and also just his hope for Great Plains Regeneration and what we can do together as a team. So take it away, Graham.
Everybody see that? Okay, so I am going to give a bigger picture. There will be some focus on kind of the state of Nebraska, which is obviously where I'm most familiar with. And furthermore, I'm also going to take a snapshot of kind of like where our farm is in the picture and the practices that we have deployed and we are deploying. So follow along, and definitely love the questions that I'm sure will come afterwards. So Regenerate Nebraska is actually a network that is comprised of, in the second edition, Regeneration Proclamation, which is our vision statement about Nebraska, what it looks like if everybody were to be using the regenerative agriculture model. And so the groups that have signed on to that vision, you know, believe in that very strongly. And these groups represent farms, tribes, businesses that support farms getting product to market, and or seed or cover or any of these other kinds of things, or sympathetic organizations, and even in some cases, communities. These make up what started off, or what led to the second edition having about 86 partners. Now we're going and we're getting ready to develop our third edition proclamation. We're going to be closer to having 200 network partners, and we're taking those partners, and because we understand this regional marketplace that we have to work across state borders into the conversations that are starting to take place at Great Plains Regeneration. And so Regenerate Nebraska is glad to be folded into these conversations. And we're already starting to see the fruits of some of the opportunities that we can have, and further slowly developing out this local region marketplaces to secure up our food system. I mentioned earlier, I'm part of the 5th generation farm. So we homesteaded in 1867. That was the year that our state went from a territory to a state. So it is a family tradition, and that picture is with my grandpa when I was a young man. And just to like bring it back down home, this is a home that my brother lives at, this place right across the road from where I'm at now. But this house burnt down in the 30s. So this shot, was taken in the early 1900s. And the guy in the top, second one from the left, that's Christian, and that's where my last name Christensen comes from, son of Christian. And I'm essentially his descendant. Some of the stuff that I think we're aware of, we've seen a stretch of negative farm income, although some of the commodity markets are back up these last several months. We know that we have a system that is volatile and is not trending in favor of the producer. And of course, meaning that a lot of us have had to give up the idea of farming as our full-time occupation, but really hone down on finding other ways to go about making this work. And this is not equitable. And so this is part of the regenerative conversation. Of course, our water quality issues are growing in this area. All those red dots, this is from a citizen scientist effort that GC Resolve was a part of, that worked with public health to get free water testing kits on nutrients, nitrates particularly. And this is a screenshot of nitrates. And so you can see the red dots outweigh anything else. That means we're over the EPA legal limit of 10 parts per million. And so Jessica talked about watershed focus. We have big issues going on, and we can't wait. We must address them now. Luckily, we have all the solutions. Here's nutrient leaching in excess, what it looks like. I can't swim in the ponds and the lakes that I used to growing up in Nebraska. And of course, the 2019 floods really brought some understanding home to many more people about what we're up against and why we need to stabilize the soil in the process of agriculture as a priority. This is my hometown. This is the football field that I played high school football on. This is the Missouri River Valley, just about 20 miles to the south and east of our farm. Luckily, we were up in the hills when this all hit, so the water didn't quite get to our area. But young people are starting to do things. They're starting to make the moves, and farmers are trending in the direction of getting more roots in the ground. And that young farmers near Fremont, Nebraska, Chad Christensen, is an example of that. He's also someone who I can bounce ideas off of, and be able to share. And we know the solution. This is proven. We got it. So we're moving down a solution-oriented path. We know where we need to go. What do? What does this do? Of course, it reduces harmful greenhouse gases, not just CO2. We get to go much beyond that. Regenerative ag really is a silver bullet opportunity in a lot of areas if we can do this on a broad scale. We have better water holding capacity in drought. We have cleaner water as well, and we are able to grow more nutritious food per acre, all at the same time reducing our input expenses along the way and potentially finding value added. Just like Gail was saying, the success in raising your organic matter levels. Well, I learned a lot through experiencing and being on the farm of Delphi here in not too far away in northeast Nebraska, kind of right on that border. He, without a drop of synthetic nutrients, after he made a significant change in his farming operation as well, saw that without a drop of that synthetic nitrogen, was able to reduce his emissions by properly integrating livestock, cows into his operation. He saw a spike of 2.6 to 6.9% in that organic matter level. And his productivity went up, and so did his profitability per acre. And there's just more people involved with the farm. So what are the practices of regenerative agriculture? You're a specialized group. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on going into this, but what I would say is that more biodiversity, proper implementation of livestock, And it doesn't matter if you're in the panhandle or the sandhills in Nebraska and ranch country, or if you're in farm country here on the eastern side of the state, there is a role for you. It doesn't matter if you're on a tribe. It doesn't matter if you're in the inner city. The regeneration has a place for you. If you are a consumer, you can demand where your food comes from. So it starts looking more biodiverse like this, and that the animals are treated in a way and utilized in a way that is beneficial for the planet. You have that choice. There's a role for each one of us within this field. And so what does regenerative agriculture mean when we just start to focus on the soil for starts? It means that all of these things, not just plants, but all of these things can grow from these opportunities. We can rebuild our rural communities that by industry, frankly, have been abused over past time. Composting, milling, tree people, cover crop seed people, livestock folks, bees and pollinators, small processing to solidify that food security in our local systems, food co-ops, marketing systems, local distribution, increased skills jobs, and new tech that help us better understand the benefits that we're doing when we add that biodiversity. These are all opportunities that come from regenerative ag. This is Grain Place Farms. You can see this young man looking at this 220 bushel corn that hasn't seen any synthetic nutrients since the 1970s. We got models all over the place, but I want to, in Nebraska, I want to just hone down and look at our farm right now. The majority of our farm we put into a more extensive, more biodiverse cover crop system over the last couple of years. We've gone all over to non-GMO varieties, cutting back some of these chemicals that we really don't like is the goal, and we hope to continue to do that more and more. We started experimenting with hazelnuts, and so we brought in some of Mark Shepard's hazelnuts, and we're breeding and pollinating those hazelnuts with the Nebraska Forestry Service breeds to try to build a rust-tolerant breed here in Nebraska. But we like hazelnuts because in a state that uses a lot of irrigation, we want to find some crops that we can still be able to put under the pivot. And on our farm, where we have 4 pivots that cover the majority of these 612 acres, we think that this alley cropping could offer a big opportunity to, of course, sequester carbon, but also to stop erosion and produce on the same amount of acres more food. We've redeveloped our nutrient management program. We've expanded wildlife habitat. We've increased our irrigation monitoring. You can see we're solar powered. We drive electric vehicles. But to zoom in even further of kind of a plan this in action, this is the home place of what ultimately is about an 800-acre farm. And so this is a quarter section that I want to show for an example. You can see the north place, which is where I'm at there. It's got the grain elevator system, and we got a little barn there. But I've drawn some things on here. This is a really steep drop off down this hill, and going down this hill, we've been experiencing a ton of erosion issues. So we have been a part of the problem of losing erosion. We are part of what the NRCS is telling us in Nebraska averages 3 tons per acre per year of topsoil that we're losing. And we can't continue to function as a business that depends on the soil that way. So we have to make changes. And when we recently did deep core soil tests, we found out that our topsoil is not as deep as what I had expected it was. So these are concerning things for me. And I've seen the patterns play out historically. We need biodiversity. So if you were to look at this place now, everything's green because we have that 4 species rye-based cover coming up. These crosses in that triangle, this is our plans to potentially expand into a silvopasture grazing system. You see that down to the left kind of corner, bottom corner, you pee, that pond is gonna just be a small pond that'll help retain that water and cut off that erosion. And then you can see down in the creek, we have a buffer there in a CRP program, but we're expanding that into enhanced filtration now for wildlife, but eventually for expanded haying or grazing. These A's represent alley cropping systems. We're a few years away from this yet, but we can mesh this with the contour of our pivot or with the circle of our pivot and the contour of our slope to be able to further cut off erosion. And once again, still do our non-GMO and soybean pass within this system, but not really disrupt anything that we're doing except for bringing on another couple of jobs to be able to manage what will be a significant amount of trees and getting them to market, which I'm hoping to work further with GPR as well as already some other folks on establishing more market for more of these tree crops. You can see there's down here, we got a square that says HO, that stands for Hazelnut Orchard, and a C, and that's already in place. And then a C would be some kind of a cannabis greenery we're exploring, looking at down the road as well. But the main next step for us is to get livestock grazing through all this and use those bad boys as part of our nutrient management plan. And so this year, the perennial rye is coming up now, but we're going to try to do an R4 to R6 drop into the corn, which is before the 4th of July, while the corn is still small. We drop annual rye with a mix of some other things. And then when we come through in the fall to harvest it, we're anticipating from experience lived through others in Iowa and some other places around the area that rye is going to be able to pop up, and we would be able to use that as a grain feed and get cattle in our field right after the harvest, and just better utilize that cover crop and be able to meet all of our goals and cut down on our nutrient expenses, which is our overall primary goal at the farm. So diversified systems, diversified enterprises. This is helping us regain our independence, which goes way back in our family history that we had lost by going conventional and getting too big and playing with too big numbers that just didn't work for us. Once again, for the people in the dry area, just look at what Alejandro Cadillo has done in Chihuahua, Mexico, through parts of Texas and up into New Mexico. So we know the great magic of healing the earth that we have through regenerative practices, especially with the livestock integration. These sandhills of our state, they are worth protecting. A slight change in temperature can change everything. And of course, we're looking at implementation of tree range chicken models. We love the biodiversity there. When Costco came into our state, it made us understand that we needed a solution for poultry too, because this was disrupting communities and pitting people against each other. And we're already doing water tests, and the pathogen levels related to poultry are going up. This is not a sustainable future. I don't want to live in a toxic wasteland. So we're bringing in alternatives to deal with these kind of systems and differentiating or adding new markets. This is the final slide that I want to run through with everybody today. In Nebraska, what does this boil down to? If we were to simplify this and decide policy moving forward that can help spur this, these are the areas that we need to look at. Number one, we need to buffer all of our running waterways. We need to seal off that leaching, that soil loss, and everything that's in that soil that's going into our waterways, moving all the way downstream to our population centers of Omaha and Lincoln, which is about 1.2 million people, and further disrupting the quality of water in the wells that sit in these waterways. We can do better. We're going to focus on that. There's some really interesting conversations going on. So I'm hopeful this will be the first step that can allow us to grow regeneration much beyond our waterways. The second thing is we need to expand those cover crop acres onto all row crop farms. 3, we need to reintegrate livestock properly. 4, we need to use that degraded rangeland restoration that I just pointed out briefly that Cadillo is doing such an amazing job of. And we need to integrate pasture into these grazing rotations as well. This will help, stop those kind of great type activities if things were to dry up. Statewide shelter belt program needs to be updated. And we also then need to develop these marketplace systems for agroforestry to allow more of those products to have easier local and regional markets. Guaranteed, we'll be working with GPR on that. And we already are looking at some very small pilot projects that we're conversing with the team there. And then of course, if you want that energy independent side of things, you got to expand into your own, little renewable energy systems, which has just saved us a ton of money as well personally. So it's an honor to be with this panel. It's an honor to be with all of you. And I can't wait to be working with everyone here so we can start slowly expanding these little markets all across this part of the country, all across this Great Plains region.
Graham, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. And, that takes me back to Gail's comment about we've been needing to have this conversation for 20 years, and hearing you really just let us know everything that you've been up to. It's absolutely amazing. Keep regenerating. We talked a little bit about the principles at the beginning of the call and just this idea that there's 5 principles. But what I really want to stress to everybody, what we're talking about here is very place-based. So we have had connections with folks all over the world In fact, we've even got people on the call international. We've done work in Australia. We've been over, talking to folks in Europe and Africa. The principles are the same anywhere that there's soil, but the practices that Graham utilizes to be able to do regenerative agriculture in Nebraska, those specific practices might look different to what Gail's doing, to what Nicole's doing. So I just want to stress here that it is important to know your identity and know what works in your region, and be able to collaborate and do work in that manner. So place-based agriculture is what really comes to mind right now. So let's move down south. Let's pick up some conversation in Oklahoma. My good friend Nicole Ragland, you've been on this regenerative journey, and your pathway to this journey is pretty unique compared to the type of work you do. Would you like to just give us a little bit of what you got going on in Oklahoma?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Graham. It's just such an honor to know you and work alongside you, and for folks that are watching, to get a good understanding of our contingent at GPR. I think it's a really rare opportunity to be working in separate states and working separate but together, where we have, obviously Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, friends in Texas that we're constantly talking about. So really just an honor to be with all of you, and thank you for that really solid presentation, Graham, really great. My trajectory has been all over the world. Like I said, I was born in Oklahoma, and cared deeply about the environment at an early age, and studied environmental science, not really knowing why at the time. I think I was excited to get credit for camping at the time. And then kind of grew up and spent time in Nepal. I worked with indigenous communities in Nepal and Peru and East Africa and North Africa and Indonesia and India. And all the while really learning about biomimicry and collective wisdom. And it's touched me for, like I said, 15, 20 years, and have been telling stories photographically as well as in film for 15, 20 years, and for national and international NGOs. And then, like I said, through some sort of divine choreography, met Dr. Zach Bush and directed a film, Farmer's Footprint. And that really touched me in terms of the realization that food is medicine, and him really breaking down the details about what these chemicals are not only doing to our soils and our watersheds and our ocean, but human health, and the rise in the fact that, in this developed country within the US, we are #1 in diabetes, in cancer, in Parkinson's, in autism, in depression. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so, consequently, I've stayed in the regenerative space for the last couple of years, and spent time in Australia. I shot for RCS Australia, Terry McCosker's group, for about a month towards the end of 2019, and have been back here in Oklahoma for the last year, and really navigating the space here, and really connecting with the soil health ambassadors, folks from the Conservation Commission, the conservation districts, the Noble Foundation. Hopefully many of you are paying attention to what Noble is doing. They're doing a complete overhaul, and they're working closely with Dr. Alan Williams, Ray Archuleta, and Gabe with Understanding Ag, and really focused on grazing lands. So in so doing, and connecting folks and building relationships here in Oklahoma, carving out a space and working as an aggregate to these state agencies, the commission, the districts, Grazing Land Coalition, and Noble Foundation, who are the prime folks that are focused on soil health, many of which are doing farmer-to-farmer programs, which is absolutely necessary. NRCS is getting behind it, General Mills. There's a lot of focus on teaching our producers soil health and transitioning their operation from the chemicals to regen. And obviously, being a storyteller, so much of what we all talk about within this group, and further throughout the country and even Australia, the big question, the $1 million question, is how do we get this to the masses? And so that to me really is my focus, and what a lot of the entities here in Oklahoma get excited about Regenerate Oklahoma, is really focusing on media and strategy and education to consumers, so that we can build out stronger demand. To remind folks, I remember once Monsanto themselves actually said, if organic, then the needle of organic, we only have 6% demand of just organic in this country. And if that needle were moved to 13%, that would actually affect them economically. So we have a tremendous amount of work to do. And all of us that are in this space, I mean, we're all talking to each other and we think we're reaching thousands, millions, but obviously we have a tremendous amount of work to do. So our three buckets are media and education. We are focused on agribusinesses and connecting with urban communities. We have a really great pilot project in the works. Maybe a little bit too soon to talk about, but I do want to share it because it's a really great idea. We, through a series of connections, connected to a dairy farmer out of Cushing, and he happens to be a developer and working in Edmond and Oklahoma City and throughout Oklahoma. And what they're building is basically a creamery for the dairy farm. Obviously an extended market from their operation into an urban area. And they're building, it's basically like this circular agritecture is what they're calling it, right? So there's a brewery and there's a creamery, a taco stand, and they want to partner with us in order to bring in soil health consultation, bring in media, bring in basically creating this whole edible landscape as well as 50-foot greenhouse. So if, you know, as you're wandering, get a beer, getting a taco, you're then learning about where your food comes from, you know, where your ice cream, your dairy comes from, and getting a solid story of who's behind it. So storytelling is absolutely necessary. And to be clear, storytelling is much different than reporting. I want to emphasize that to all folks. We all inherently are storytellers, and we have these strange and wonderful platforms by way of social media to share the deep stories of producers. Many folks watched the recent cut of Gail Fuller for Farmer's Footprint, who just obviously he's really good on camera and has done it many times, but translating the details of what is happening on these farms, what's happening to families, what's happening to marginalized communities, obviously our watersheds, the list goes on, which again, why I'm so focused on this and why it's so important. So yeah, so basically media and education is very, very big for us. And again, acting as an aggregate to the state agencies and the organizations here in Oklahoma. And building out a strong website in order to create heroes out of our producers across the state. We have 39 tribes here in Oklahoma. So we're all well aware there's nothing new in regenerative agriculture. It's agriculture that comes from our indigenous ancestors. Due to COVID, many, if not most, all of the tribes basically created processing plants over the last year, 2 years, that essentially has created autonomy and helps to build out a focus for markets and empowering our rural communities. So that's super exciting as well. So just got off the ground. We literally got fiscal sponsorship from the Communities Foundation of Oklahoma, which again, they are all about empowering rural communities as well. So they're super excited about this. Folks can go to regenerateoklahoma.us and be updated on how we move forward. But yeah, it's a general overview. But thank you all for being here and being part of it. I'm grateful to work alongside everyone involved. It's going to take all of us.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for giving us an update on what's going on. And I think you're very eloquent when you talk about the work that's been existing before us. So thank you for adding that in. And also, I just recognize and acknowledge that all of you, Graham, Gail, and Nicole, we have so many projects that we just want to shoot from the rooftops, but some of them aren't quite ready for the announcement. And so I would just encourage everybody to stay tuned. Check out our social media channels, sign up on our website to be able to hear more from us. And I really think the next couple of weeks are going to help us solidify a little bit more of our path forward. And all of you on the call are going to be able to join us during all of this transition as well. So thank you so much for that, Nicole. And guys, don't forget to put your questions in the chat. We're going to transition over here and hear a little bit from Gail Fuller. He doesn't talk much. He's pretty shy and he's pretty reserved. So hopefully we're able to pull out a message from him, but only time will tell. Gail, let me know if you need anything loaded. I do have a video loaded, but definitely not required. So Mr. Gail Fuller from Sudbury, Kansas, welcome.
Thanks, Jess. And thank God we got you and I working here together in Kansas, because trying to keep up with what Nicole's doing in Oklahoma and Graham's doing in Nebraska, and Kansas doesn't like losing to those two states very much. So we've obviously got a lot of work to do to try to keep up with those two. So and it's really hard to follow those first two acts, and a lot of what I talk about will mirror what they said, but if it's that important, it needs to be repeated. And so I'm going to kind of start with a Google Earth view. We're going to start at 30,000 feet and then kind of zoom in on what we're working on our farm and what GPR and our farm have aligned to go forward with. And I've been fortunate being in this as long as we've had dozens and dozens of farm tours. And I've got the last few years to where I start every farm tour with a question to the group. And our groups are consumers, farmers of all shapes and sizes, and different agency people on the tours. And the question that I start each tour with is, what keeps you awake at night? To me, soil is the answer. What is the question? And I have yet to have a person ask me a question that I can't solve with healthy soil. And if you look at the crisis in America today, we have a social unrest crisis. We have a weather extremes crisis, as Graham pointed out in his presentation, just in what they've gone through Nebraska in the last few years. And we're seeing that more and more all across the U.S. with wildfires, hurricanes, flooding, droughts, et cetera. We have a health crisis that both of the earlier presenters have talked about, and especially Nicole hit on. And, the one that didn't get talked about in the health crisis is mental health and depression. And something we've got to get solved is more and more farmers are killing themselves and dealing with depression. And I was visiting with Sarah Keogh the other day, who's on the call. And she basically said that, 100% of Americans right now are dealing with low grade stress, from what we've been dealing with for the last year plus. In America. And, so we've got a lot of issues on our plate that we have to fix. The best part is this is easily fixed simply by fixing the water cycle. The government, they've got their plan for how they're going to fix this. They're addressing all of these issues, but really they're really just putting bigger Band-Aids on the problem. And we've got to, what we're looking at here is a total paradigm shift in food production and food consumption in the United States. And it's not going to be an easy change, but it's something we've got to fix. We can't just address this with some cover crops and buffer strips and, a little regenerative or organic food here and there. We're talking about a complete overhaul of the education system for kids, for consumers, for farmers, completely changing the practices on the farms today, which means we've got to find a way to deal with policy that's in place that doesn't always enhance these practices. So, we've got a lot of work to do, but, everything that I've talked about here is simply a sign of desertification and a broken water cycle. And as, Graham and Nicole talked about, changing practices, these are really easy fixes once we get the mindset of the farmers change, the consumers change. Getting the water cycle fixed really can be done pretty quickly and fairly easily once we get started. Here in Kansas, and I'm sure Graham and Nicole would echo these sentiments in Nebraska and Oklahoma and all across the U.S. I live in Greenwood County, Kansas now. It's basically a large food desert. Poverty rates here in our county are running 30%. And again, things that we can easily fix with regenerative agriculture. This isn't, again, this isn't just about, planting some cover crops. It's about regenerating our rural communities, getting people employed again, getting money circulating through farms, through the small towns, new processing plants, revitalizing our small rural grain elevators, which I think Deanna talked about in the chat here earlier, is, employing people regionally, locally, and you know, I'm like Nicole and Jessica. I wish we could talk more about the projects we got going, but just the fact that no older than these organizations are, we've already got projects in the work, show you how committed we are and how quickly we need to make these changes and how fast we plan on doing them. So, you know, it's going to be exciting, not just in the next few years, but literally in the next few days and weeks as more of these projects come to light. You know, I think a lot of what we're talking about with these projects is getting farmers back in control of their lives, getting them control of their operations, letting them decide what's planted, how it's marketed, you know, how we reach consumers instead of just playing the government game of planting whatever they dictate us to plant and selling it for whatever price the market is willing to bear on a given day. You know, that's tried and failed miserably, and we certainly have to find a new system. So what that means on our farm, and I talked briefly about it in my introduction. Graham showed some numbers on his farm and on, Delphic's farm in Nebraska, fixing the water cycle, improving soil organic matters. On my prior farm in 20 years time, we went from 2% soil organic matter to 7% soil organic matter. And now we're back to a farm that's highly degraded. The infiltration rates here are horrible. Our first inch of infiltration is over 45 minutes, and that's on our cropland, that's on our native range land also. And on our prior farm, we were infiltrating the first inch in well under a minute, and the second inch also in under a minute. So, we know we can fix this really fast. And so now we're wanting to do on this farm in the next 5 or so years what it took us 20 years to do on our previous farm. And how we do that is, first of all, learning from the mistakes we made on our previous farm. So hopefully we can cut those out. But it's simply a matter of getting diversity in place as fast as possible, diversity of plants, diversity of livestock, diversity of the mind, of willing to try new ideas and new practices, looking at different ways of giving diversity onto the ground and plants. We started off 20 years ago with going with diverse cover crop mixes, going from 1 species of cover crop to 3 to eventually almost 100 species of cover crops. And now, like Graham talked about with his farm, interseeding cover crops into growing cash crops, either after planting or with planting. And basically for the last several years, I've grown no monocultures on my farm. If a crop has to be grown in a monoculture, I'm not going to grow that crop anymore. And I think we can find ways of adding diversity in our cropping systems, no matter what we're talking about in plants, whether it's, like I said, whether it's planting cover crops before or after we're planting the cash crop, we can find ways to get diversity. And it's also diversity of livestock. We found out really fast that cover crops make a great forage crop, and the cows were brought back onto the system. We were told we couldn't have cattle in a farming operation if we were no-till. And today, not only do we have cattle, we have sheep, pigs, chickens, and they all bring different things to the soil life. They bring different things to the grazing ability, to the management of the landscape. So for us, it's about getting as much diversity on the farm as we can. And then the other thing we want to do is to get a research component on this new farm so that we can show conventional and early stage regenerative farms what we're doing in real time, how it's affecting the soil, and all of those aren't going to be positive effects. We make mistakes like everybody else, but when we show a failure on this farm and we show it in real time, it's something that all farmers can look at and say, hey, what went wrong and how can we avoid this on our farms going forward? So again, we're just really excited to be a part of this. I'm so honored to be working with Jessica and John and Graham and Nicole, and looking forward to where we can go from here. So let's regenerate.
Thank you, Gail. Folks, I just put a press release in the chat box. Feel free to download that and share it with your networks. We are going to be facilitating the production of Fuller Field School on September 8th and 9th. Sarah Keogh, who is on the call, will be one of our keynote speakers. So please take a look at that. Go to the website, get registered. There will be limited registrations this year for obvious reasons. I don't even need to talk about why we have limited registrations anymore. A big announcement, Gail, you don't even know this. We did have an organization come to us today and approve 10 scholarships. So we are going to be able to offer 10 scholarships for the attendance of this event And we're in early conversations, but I think that it's going to work out to where these scholarships will also cover transportation and lodging. So just as an announcement, like I said, things are just coming in really fast to us on the stuff that we're doing. So Fuller Field School, check it out. This is not your mama's field day. I mean, this is an actual field school. You will touch, you will learn, you will be out working. So get ready for that. So guys, I really want to transition here over to Q&A. And the way that I love to do Q&A is I like to visually see all of you. So if you don't mind turning on your cameras, and if you have a question that you'd like to ask to our presenters, if you look down at the bottom, there are some reactions, and you can, put your hand up like that, or you can put it down, whatever you might want to do. But just to kind of get us kick-started with the Q&A, one of our farmer advisors, Steve DeWitt, is on the line. And Steve has really been leaning in a little bit about some of the projects we're on to. We have a couple projects where we can't really talk about right now because we're still developing. So Steve, you're a producer in Oklahoma. What crops do you grow? What do you see? Why do you think an organization like this is beneficial from your point of view?
Yes, I'm from northern Oklahoma, small grower, work a day job in town. I've had the desire to get away from that for years, but as you know, a lot of our farms have aging landowners. My dad would be one of those, and the opportunity for them to pass that on to the next generation is very limited. And it's a sad fact. We've got farmers in their 70s and 80s that still can't turn it over to the next generation for a lot of reasons. And so that's one thing that attracted me so much to GPR. In my area, it's a dryland wheat, soybean, grain, sorghum, cattle area. So I do all of those, plus I'm a few years into soil health and doing a lot of cover crop grazing, intensive grazing, moving a lot of polywire, and trying to do that from the hours of usually, since I'm an hour away from work, 6 in the evening to about 6 the next morning. So just excited about what GPR is doing. I think it was mentioned in a previous call that we had about kind of the 3 legs of GPR, and social, economic, and agronomic. And those have been mentioned today. It's not just cover crops. It's not just those specific practices, but it's all 3. And GPR, after being around here just a short time, I visualize it as kind of an incubator of soil health, regenerative grounded business ventures that change the food system, improve the food system, and improve the lives of its farmers that it's serving, farmers and communities. So very excited also to hear about Regenerate Oklahoma. Just stumbled onto that a few weeks ago. So highly interested in what's going on there.
Yeah, Steve, thank you so much. We've pinged you a lot and asked your opinions a lot. And throughout the conversation, we're kind of talking about heritage grains, and Dr. Chris Nichols put in the chat that she thought that some of these specialty grains, heritage grains, there's an opportunity there. And we've got a lot of producers talking about it. Deanna up in North Dakota, she's doing excellent work in, growing specialty and really taking a product that's not on the market to the market. At the same time, we have to educate the consumer about what is this product we're trying to bring? Why should they consider it? So since this is official Q&A, I'm gonna mute myself. Is there anybody that would like to ask a question? If you'd like to, go ahead and unmute yourself or wave or do something, but turn on your video in order to ask a question. That way we know that you're wanting to ask a question. So is there anybody out there that wants to get going on a particular thing? I mean, because I'll call on you. I know a lot of you out there. Okay, Deanna, I'm calling on you. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing up there in North Dakota?
Hey, sorry, let me shut this door.
So Deanna, as you're working with some turkey red wheat and some other heritage grains, right?
Right. Well, we have Rouge de Bordeaux wheat going in today, and einkorn. Both of those are brand new for us this year. And you know, talking about regenerative, a regenerative system, it's only 34 degrees here today, and we are seeding. And so it's supposed to be 50 tomorrow, but so I mean, it's a resilient system, and we're grateful for it. And I mean, just excited to learn everything from you guys. All these regenerate all your states. I'm so excited. I want to regenerate North Dakota too.
We're gonna get it going. So thank you for hopping on the call and being with us.
Yeah.
Any other questions for our speakers? Must be a Friday lunch hour. So Graham, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. We talked to when we were forming Great Plains Regeneration, and we're still in the process. Like, you know, check back in with us frequently, because you're going to see our identity really bloom. We've planted, we haven't, you know, we're working on sprouting, and what the bloom looks like, we don't quite know. Just how do we go about, you've done work with larger urban centers. And so what do you think is most important as far as conversation wise from the farm level to the urban center? Or is there a lesson that you learned in your experience that might help some of us out there, you know, join the conversation quicker?
Thanks for the good question. Well, first of all, we can't do it without, as farmers, we can't do it without engaging the urban centers. That's where the people are, and every one of these people are consumers. And even over the last 50 years or so, as we've continued to lose rural populations through urbanization, that means the political clout that we had has waned even more. So if we want to do complete regeneration, it's a two-part game. It's the consumer base that we're spending time with, as well as you know, in the urban community, as well as the farming community. So we do at Regenerate Nebraska are taking even though, you know, we have all these farmers as part of this group, we're spending a lot more time communicating, educating, sharing food with urban communities so that they understand what this is all about. And back 4 or 5 years ago when we started Regenerate Nebraska, this was what the kind of base group of farmers said. It's like, we've lost that connection. We need to go listen to these other communities. And so we went into the inner city, and we went into tribal council meetings and talked about our intentions of getting this thing straightened out. And what blew us away the most was that everyone that we talked to, no matter where it was in our state, all could rally around food, nutrition, water issues, and environmental destruction that's going on upstream, that's leading to more illness downstream. And so we knew we had a commonality right away. And so, like I said, we've been spending more time having those conversations. We've been starting to talk to folks that are in leadership positions in these areas and saying, you know, hey, the city of Omaha, for example, you should be able to have an inside-outside game, increase the urban farming ability using soil generation techniques, but then all this land that sits right outside the region of the cities, let's start developing food pipelines instead of fossil fuel pipelines that help energize our communities. And that is gaining a lot of interest. A lot of people from these communities told us we want to be able to farm. And so now the trick, I think, is going to be also, furthermore, as we start developing these little markets that help solidify food security for the area, we also need to be able to open up more opportunities with that, you know, that changing thing that's going in rural America. We need to be able to bring these two communities together so that we can actually reacquaint the farmer with the consumer in order to make things happen. And that also includes that some of these young, aspiring, creative, diverse people from these urban communities who all they want to do is get their hands dirty, who want to be a part of the solution, finding ways. And this includes federal programming through the Farm Bill that allow accessibility to the land as this great transition of land goes from the baby boomer generation to the younger generations. And so this is the key. This is the piece here that will stimulate us having a completely regenerative vision that is realized in the future, is us focusing on taking care of those people that are going to in the position to transition the land, but ensuring that young, diverse people who want it have education and skills that can come out to the farm with the ability to access now that land or even lease or own that land long term, so we can set up the next round of regenerative farmers for the future. If we don't get this right, of course, I think that you'll see more investor influence, foreign company influence, multinational influence that will own more of the land, as we're starting to see already, which probably means it's game over for the climate. So this is a serious time, and I can't talk enough about the role of consumers driving the market, demanding the same things we are in a policy deal, because this is what they put in their food, and helping the migration of young people back onto the land so that we can use that energy and creativity to do this the right way. And then that brings up one more question, and I just have to mention that this piece also incorporates a just transition for those farmers that are already here. We're not leaving them out. We're going to take care of them. And I think federal policy also needs to reflect a just transition, a risk adverse transition for existing farmers who have found themselves in these areas that Gail and I were in the past, and are also realizing there may be a better opportunity around the corner, and it may be more ecologically sound, as well as, of course, economically stable. That these are the policy areas that I think federally have to be honed down on to be able to make this work. And just to close, I know that was a big, long-winded answer, but we got to spend time equally in the consumer-based areas, the urban populated centers, no matter where they are. Give these folks the tools, the resources, the information they need, bring them into our networks, and when they're interested, find areas through all of our partner groups, through farms that are part regenerative farmers, and getting them plugged in so that they can help be a part of the system too. And that's why in Regenerate Nebraska, we're developing our young farm team, just like the minor leagues to the major leagues. We're grooming folks and we're starting to place them in all these positions with our large network. And you're going to see that continue to increase over the years, because young people get it, they want to help, but they're not in a position. And so whether they're farming or not, we have to bring those people to the table. And then I did have one more point. I'm sorry. I think that after we have just a little more informed and intellectual consumer base, which obviously Regenerate Nebraska is working hard on that, we will look to revamp corporate farming protections, because we're getting decimated out here by those things, and our local control has been whittled down, and it's going to take a more informed consumer base to be able to help do that, which should just stop some of the bleeding and some of the environmental degradation and some of the low wages that have been decimated our socioeconomic status here, in favor of this regenerative system, which equity for the farmer and those that are part of the supply chain system is obviously one of the pillars of what we have to get right this time around. We can't make those mistakes anymore and let those dollars all flow away from our community. So there's a lot happening, but if you want a simple message, 50-50, farmer and consumer, we need them. They have to be our equal partners. They're going to drive this for us, but we have to give them the tools. We have to take time to know them again.
So Graham, you're eloquent, you're intense and passionate at the same time. We need you talking more. Don't ever feel bad for talking, because we need you talking more, because I feel like you seamlessly integrate these conversations with rural and urban. And joining us, we have Laura Priest and Laura Thomas that are part of Regenerate Nebraska. So your team has done just such an amazing work on the ground. So thank you so much. I just wanted to mention there are extra points given for wearing our Soil for Climate hats. GPR doesn't have any merchandise, but if you would like to support us through a different organization, you can purchase your Soil for Climate hat. And I wanted to get to one of the questions in the chat. It says from Stephanie, other than telling our stories How can those of us that are at smaller acreage that are starting to do regenerative practices best engage with the community? So she asks, is there collaboration around data collection to aggregate and demonstrate benefits? So that's one thing that I'm really passionate about, is being able to collect the information, talk about it, and then have that information put back out into the community in ways that actually ignite change. So through GPR, we have a number of grant proposals out right now, and one is going to be working in a specific watershed that we haven't selected at this time, but that's what we're looking at. And I don't have, I'm kind of joking here because we have the hat, when you're in farming, there's lots and lots of hats that you wear, but I like to support the companies that are supporting regenerative. So Continuum Ag is another company out there that is working on data collection, and they're working on being able to, whether you're big or small, be able to have like a one-stop data collection activity so that then you can reuse your data multiple times. And so that would just kind of be my benefit to add to the conversation, Stephanie, is that I think we're getting there, and I think more stuff is coming out. So there's a lot of questions in the chat, but if anybody was ready for a question, if they wanted to unmute and ask it, I'm going to scroll down here. So while I read, if you have something, feel free to, oh, Carl couldn't find his soil regen hat, so no extra points for Carl today. What other questions do we have out there from the group?
I have a quick question, maybe for Graham and Gail. So I work in water quality in Nebraska, and I was just curious, we work really closely with NRCS and a lot of work underneath the 2018 Farm Bill. And Gail, I know you were talking about, it's not just cover crops, it's a whole overhaul of the system, and I'm totally with you on that. I guess my question is, what do you guys see the role of local government in supporting this movement? I know there's a lot of cost share opportunities, but a lot of times we don't get the buy-in and we don't get the participation that we hope for. And I know there's a lot of caveats to why. But as producers, what can your local government do better to provide, and get these farmers over that hump of maybe being like skeptical or not sure, or transitioning into cover cropping or no-till or things like that? What are the barriers, and what can government be doing better? I mean, there's a lot that government can be doing better, but
Gail, do you want to go first or second? I definitely do have some comments. Okay.
Go ahead, Graham.
Well, it's great to see a fellow Nebraskan on the call. Thank you for posing that question. I think we need to get back in the act of better utilizing local government for the purposes that it was actually set out to do, rather than trying to depower it away so we don't have any kind of active say in what we're doing as big systems come in, and then there's no room for the local markets. So first of all, there's a big role, and like a very simple thing, like our county, Burt County, just went through this whole zoning process and their future vision. And I had a few asks, but one simple ask was, can you prioritize soil because we have an erosion issue going on here as one of our overarching objectives? Because I knew just that some simple verbiage on that would put us in a place to be able to do more and more. That it would wave the flag, and we would signal that we want to be a leader in this, and they wouldn't do that at this time. I think that mentality is still changing. I think we had a bunch of big guys on that board, big farmers on that board, and even them are telling me this actually is good stuff. We might have to revisit that. So getting the local governments to set objectives and priorities. The city of Lincoln with their climate action plan to be a safe and resilient city, they just did that. They prioritize food security as one of the components of their climate action plan. So we're actually starting a program that would look at how we leverage federal funding through the NRCS, through the RCPP program, right on the ground in there to develop food systems using regenerative principles and having some mentorship type folks that would, help work with the farmers there to be able to deploy these to help also keep the water table around Lincoln clean and ample. But also so that we break down food security and we have a commercial system that is actually using the right principles all around the city. So this is another way to get engaged. And then the other way that I would say in Nebraska, especially for local government or local entity, is look at those natural resource districts. Start engaging with the boards there. They are supposed to be working on water quantity and quality issues. In our natural resource district, which is the lower Elkhorn River NRD, they just had meetings on our whole stage 2 nitrate plan because the nitrates are getting so heavy. They're trying to tell us, when to put it out and to multiple apply. And maybe these things aren't terrible, but they're not putting the farmer in the position. They're not helping drive in those funding and providing the leadership to put the farmer in the position to do the right thing. And so we just need to keep that in mind as well, because the funds are there to be able to do this stuff. I think there's people within our part of the country and outside of the country that want to try to support this. I think that the GPR through its networks wants to try to have a role from time to time where it's feasible, like where this can happen, and figuring out how we can make things match to start doing these little pilots that allow for these regional markets to be able to develop and flourish all around these things that protect the water table. And then we need to kind of understand the changes going on over time. So get these conversations going on locally first. And it's the most important at the ground level. These should be the normal conversations. And then we'll do things like revamp LB 729 and enhance our buffers. And we got some vision with the Soil Health Task Force that was created. There's energy here. Now's the time we go forward, and groups like us can help, like also find like the right kind of farmers that are deploying the right kind of skills to be able to, be part of that solution in that way. But we definitely need your help, and we need local people's help. Only together are we going to start establishing, chipping away pieces and getting some of our market back, as well as our culture.
Yeah, Gail, just adding on, Kevin asked too, just like to add on to this question, maybe you can also talk about long-term vision, for regenerative communities. Gail, that question was for you.
I was reading the question and listening to you at the same time and still trying to digest everything that Graham said. So, I think just real quickly on what Graham, just a real quick follow-up on that question on local politics. Anybody knows me know I'm not a big fan of national politics. I really don't see them as being helpful in this at the moment. I would like to say I still have some hope for local and state politics, but at the same time, Kansas has brought a 50-year water vision plan in play, and within a few weeks they allowed more large-scale animal CAFOs of chicken and swine. So we've got some issues in Topeka also. We really need to. I think if you want to play the political game, we need to focus on local and state politics. I think there's still hope there that we can make some changes, and obviously water in Kansas, like anywhere else, is going to be the key driver of politics, I think, going forward with the issues we're seeing in the Ogallala. We're going to be basically out of water by the end of the century. The reservoir system in Kansas is a mess. Most of the reservoirs are going to be not doing their job within another 10 to 20 years, and there's really no plan in place to fix that. So, a vision going forward. Let me reread Kevin's question real quick here. So Kevin asked, long-term vision for rural communities.
Yeah. That's a question that we've had a lot. Nicole, we've talked about this too, is paint the picture of success. What's that look like? What are some, I talked in my presentation about a few key indicators of success. Being food secure, I think is one vision. I think COVID exposed our insecurities, and COVID exposed that we are one teeny tiny just kink in the chain from having hungry people. And it's shocking and horrifying all at the same time. And so I think regenerative agriculture is going to relocalize not only our food, but we have to relocalize our thought processes. we have to choose local. I'm a mom, I've got 3 kiddos. The food budget is big. Okay. So Nicole, think about that a little bit. What sort of visions come to your head when you think about success?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us, we have to realize that politicians follow people. We forget this. And if we don't really, all of us kind of start acting as visionaries and thinking about, how do we build a market in these boarded up little towns? That's one thing that, and being really inspired by this pilot project that I mentioned earlier, this creamery, what they're building out in Edmond is a pretty massive project, but his name's Patrick Myers. He lives out of Cushing, a small rural community. I mean, he kept saying, like, this needs to happen in my tiny little town. So that's one of our goals at Regenerate Oklahoma, is essentially to act as a broker, where we go to investors, say an Oklahoma State Bank, and say, we want to it's going to take this amount of money to build out a market in this little town. We've got these producers within a 30-mile radius. And this is how we can employ X amount of people, and it's really just being visionaries and connecting the right people to build out a hyper local food sovereign autonomous zone in these areas. So it's just a matter of connectivity. I think all of us, we keep waiting for someone to save us, but being these private entities outside of state agency gives us license to create what it is that we want to create. And build out networks and connect to investors. I mean, Graham is right. The money is there. It's just a matter of implementing and getting strong structures in place and then executing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gail.
Go ahead, Jess. Okay. Yeah, Nicole, you're spot on. My vision of what a regenerative community looks like long-term, so just present day in Kansas is losing 25-year-olds faster than any state in the nation. Almost every small town in Kansas is fighting with the town next door over who gets to keep the high school. Consolidation is going on. Obviously there's mass exodus as farms are getting bigger, towns are getting smaller. It's really easy to connect the dots. And as Graham pointed out, 7 years of negative farm income explains why farms have to get bigger. So we're back to paradigm shift. But my vision of a regenerative community and what I think we need to be is, and don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily wanting to go back to the 1920s or 30s or 40s, but those were communities that were much more thriving than what we have today. There was a butcher shop, there was a processing plant, there was a mill, there was an elevator, there was a, 1 or 2 department stores, 1 or 2 grocery stores, and they were all locally owned. And I think so where we start is we have to get farmers profitable, and then we have to educate farmers that profitability doesn't mean they need to swallow up the neighboring farm. We need to get farmers profitable enough that they can start to give up acreage. I think that the one thing we haven't talked about today is while 25-year-olds are leaving Kansas faster than any state in the nation, we're starting to see an influx of immigration back from the coast, starting with California, as those people are packing up and leaving a drought-stricken state and moving inward. And I think we're going to see more off of other cities, Houston, New Orleans, and others rapidly as sea level rise, hurricanes, we see some of these things. So we need to be prepared that I think we're going to have an influx of people, but, getting farms profitable so that we can get more farmers back, more farmers, more kids, which means more demand for grade schools, high schools. And then we've got to get control of our farms and our food system away from ADM, General Mills, all of those. We've got to get farmers in control of marketing their food again so that they're gleaning the income and circulating it through the community. So there's demand for local food, local clothing, local mills, local gas stations in rural America.
Yeah, so just following up, Gail, the chat's lively right now. I mean, we got to get weird. We got to do things that we know are going to advance us. Sarah, I know you're weird. I'm looking at you, girl. Gail, our farms need to look weird. It's like when there was a question in the chat, like, Gail, to walk us through your field school, what does it look like? There's dandelions, there's weeds, there's things that you know, it looks weird because we're working with nature. And so it's kind of funny, you know, I'm always trying to think, you know, I'm the communications marketing, like what's our catchphrase, you know, what are we trying to do? And I set up on my presentation, let's regenerate, but man, let's get weird, you know, let's think outside the box, let's pull in people. I see regenerative agriculture as our opportunity to speak to people from just so many different spectrums. We're such a divided nation. We argue over silly little things, but can we all just get behind the soil? You know, let's get our hands in there, let's get dirty, and seriously, let's regenerate. Okay, folks, we have about 5 minutes left, and I just want to do some closing remarks here with our panelists. I'd also like to remind you that the registration link that you used today also has you pre-registered for the next, I think it's the next 3 months or the next 4 months of 4th Farmer Fridays. So it should be on your calendar. If it's not on your calendar, add it. 4th Farmer Fridays will be our GPR talk. We are going to introduce Mr. Tom Cannon, and Darren Unruh will be on our next call, and we're going to be talking about regenerative practices for grain production, because that's kind of the season that we're in. And Tom, so I asked Tom, I was like, hey, I really want you to come talk on my webinar. And this was his response. Tom, do you want to give your response, or do you want me to read it?
Why don't you read it?
Okay, so I said, you know, I was texting them. I said, Tom, you know, I want you to talk about regenerative and you know, how can we have an educational series that's directed towards farmers? And he goes, yeah, sure, Jessica, I'll do it. But I want you to know that I'm not about the blue sky BS. I'm going to be very real. What will producers do and listen to? I want to be a producer who also grows. I need young regen people to bridge the gap, to be like-minded purchasers. Let them develop a value chain to help the buyer. I know how to produce a scale because he's a producer. I don't know how to sell the valuable products that I grow. So I think that's a good segue. Like the next webinar, we're going to get real with Tom Cannon, Darren Unruh. We'll probably bring some of our other collaborators into it. But yeah, let's talk about getting real with the supply chain.
I think just it's more than supply chain also. So we talk about, and Gail is always talking about community and building community, right? And so that's also, it's not just producing it. It's that, are we going to support that local miller, like you said, Gail? And are we going to build small regional food hubs? And if so, it's going to cost more money. We're not a Cargill. We don't want to deal with those multinationals. We want to build community. That's what's taking us down, in my opinion, the wrong path. So with that being said, this is going to take more money to do this. Tom, you're not going to be able to afford to go out and market your beef or wheat or whatever in the same way. And it's going to take more money and a big effort from all of us, I think, to get some of this done. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation.
Oh, anything else any other teaser you want to put out there, Tom, other than no BS Tom Cannon from Blackwell, Oklahoma?
If y'all can hear me, I couldn't say it more, how I'm not about blue sky bullshit. And there's so many people out there that are able to articulate a broad idea. But listen, I've got a farm out here that I have to make a profit in, and I'm not good at selling. I'm really not good at marketing. So I'm looking forward to finding people that are willing to add to the value chain downstream from me and take the product that I grow, because that's what I want to do. That's what my passion is. I love caring for the soil. I love producing, and I believe that's what God's called me to do. So let's let somebody else carry the baton and go on and sell this incredible product that I'm now producing, because I'm doing it within God's system.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. So unofficial title, No Bullshit Blue Sky Talk with Tom Cannon and Darren Unruh. So be there third Friday or fourth Friday of every month. So, okay, guys, we're coming up. We've got 1 minute left. I want to honor everybody's time today. And thank you so much for joining us on this lunch power hour discussion. I would just like to offer Nicole first, followed by Gail, followed by Graham. Closing thoughts on today's talk, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up.
It's probably good to piggyback off of what Tom just said. I wholeheartedly agree, and I that's something that I appreciate in this part of the country. Straight shooters and the ones that really have boots on the ground, and we all have so much to learn from each other. I'm continually learning from the folks involved on this call, as well as the contingent involved in Regenerate Oklahoma and the Great Plains. None of us are as strong as all of us, and it's going to take all of our skill set to do this. And we really just have to step into not only regenerating our land, but operating from regenerative principles and listening to the fungi and being mycorrhizal fungi for each other in order to make this happen. So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Jess, and the whole crew. Grateful to know all of you and to be working alongside of you.
Thank you. And speaking of fungi, Dr. Liz Haney, thank you. Soil Regen down in Texas. She was our Zoom ninja today, helping me on the back end of things. So thanks for the support, Liz. We really appreciate you. Okay, Gail and Graham, closing thoughts, and let's head off to our Friday.
Go ahead, Gail. I'll close.
Now you can see why I've been saying I've been waiting 20 years for today. You know, this conversation is finally happening. We got people off the coast that are paying attention to what's going on in the Great Plains. They know we are the answer to everything that's going wrong in the world today. You know, I can't wait to see where we land. And yeah, Tom is spot on. You know, we've got to not greenwash this. We've got to get profitability back into the Great Plains, and then, you know, from there we regenerate our communities. Thank everybody for showing up. Can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off Tom too. Appreciate the strong point. While I do, you know, really like blue skies myself, you know, you know, if you get overboard or greenwash too much, you can lose credibility, and we do need to focus on having a system that's more balanced in place. So with that in mind, I just really think that this 2023 Farm Bill is a really big deal for us. It offers a chance to help start to transition things and put farmers in that more risk-adverse situation, and get some pressure off just the few big commodities, shifted into a direction that will allow us some assistance in redefining that supply chain. The 2023 Farm Bill, farmers and ranchers, especially ones that understand so clearly as Tom and others on this call do, needs to be more, the engagement needs to be more organized so that we can get this thing, this conversation popping from multiple parts, multiple areas across the Great Plains region and across the country. And I see early energy for more of a regenerative reform Farm Bill that would honor some of the things that you're asking about, increasing education, being able to help get some of the systems refurbished and more usable again, helping get young people more land accessibility and protecting those of us who are in the middle of a change, get to that position so that we can not be as reliant on federal programs as we have been in the past. So, you know, let's get involved with the 2023 Farm Bill and just be a little bit more cohesive across the whole region on what we're asking for. And so if you got Tom down there, you know, saying one thing, and Gail in the middle saying another thing, and myself in Nebraska, and the gal from North Dakota, all of a sudden you're starting to see all these representatives getting some more shouts. And I guarantee, and one of the things we hope to be working on here is starting to lay down just a little bit more interaction from, you know, a group of folks who typically doesn't want to act in this way. But I think now is the time for energy. The Farm Bill will support this transition, And I think we all need to find a way to be more cohesive in our communication. So we're asking the same things, and it's getting reiterated enough where, you know, you can't really escape that out of your mindset. So thanks everybody for being here. Once again, it's a privilege, and let's regenerate.
Let's regenerate. Folks, do me a favor, tell one person, you know, talk about us, share us, send me an email, text message. Let's keep doing this. So that's all I got for you. Let's regenerate. I'm going to stick around for 5 more minutes if people want to chat, but the official meeting is closed. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much for being here.